you know that of all the people that I asked to come on this podcast, of all the people that have agreed, of all the people that have come, you were the least, you were the one that I least expected to run after for like 8 months. What's the problem, man? What's going on over here?
It's you clearly overestimate how much I appreciate you.
The problem is, and I appreciate the fact that you're on, this is the problem, that this 30 or 40 minutes or whatever is going to last.
I'm busy, so it's going to be 20.
It's 20, okay, 20 minutes. So it won't do you any justice. You know, a guy like you, the PR mastermind and communications wizard, you have so much information to give and so much knowledge to share.
You know, a secret is something you tell only one person at a time.
Okay.
And so,
no, I appreciate
being as such, I know I do appreciate you been after me to come on, and I would have loved to, but it's not always possible.
I know.
You know, it's contextual, timing, plus, getting anywhere in this city is a little complicated these days.
Just these days. Just not for the last decade.
But my office is in Old Montreal. It's probably the best part in Montreal. I love it to death. This is my 5th year. I have my office here in Old Montreal, and I wouldn't switch it for the world.
Okay, let's tell people, first of all, how we know each other, because I don't joke around like this with everyone. You are the person that actually hired me. You're the reason why I got into politics. I'm not sure if I'm happy about it or... Yeah,
do you live to regret it?
Or sour about that whole thing. I'm not sure yet. I mean, it's still debating in my head. But we go back a long time. We worked together. And then, of course, you moved on to do other and better things in public relations and communications.
No, we go back to 2007,
yes.
You and I, where you were freshly back from Greece, where you had worked for NATO.
Yeah.
And we were looking for a bright, young, eager person that spoke Greek, that had an understanding of geopolitical issues and entanglements, that was either a Montrealer by birth or by choice. And we were very lucky to find you.
Well, I appreciate that, and I was happy to be there. Honestly, and you know this, the idea for me wasn't to stay on for that long.
No, I know you.
Because I wanted to leave. I wanted to go back to Greece. I was here for the summer.
Right, you were, but we...
But in retrospect, thank God I didn't leave, because you imagine with everything that had happened in Greece, I would have come back anyway.
Maybe you would have.
Knocking on the door. Is there still a position?
You know, George, you and I have gone through a lot. We've gone through at least one federal election, one provincial election together. We've had our office occupied by about 80 aggressive protesters, riot police.
Very respectable students. Very respectable.
Exactly. They had an issue that they wanted to bring to the government's attention, and they decided, hi, let's crash this party.
Yeah. Let's stick a bunch of papers all over the office, and we'll prove our point. And that was quite the experience.
But yeah, we do go back a long time.
Very quickly, because we have some interesting things to talk about. Politics for you, how it started, when, why it started. Give me that whole background.
I got involved in politics back when I was in CEGEP, Champlain St. Lambert. Got involved in some student politics back then. This is the end of the 90s. And I gave a very rare TV interview back then to some community channel. It was 2 young Federalists versus 2 young Separatists. Mm-hmm. And the other young Federalist is today Aéroport de Montréal Vice President Martin Massé.
Okay.
He was Chief of Staff to Robert Poitier when he was Minister of Transport, etc. And so we were the 2 young Federalists, and a lobbyist saw me on TV. This is very early 1999, and had his team reach out to me, and I went to work for him for a year. So that's really how I got into politics, and then government relations, partisan politics. We were involved with one major national political party.
And you started from the youth wing, and you moved up.
Not so much. I never really was one to be in the youth wing formally. So I was a young person in a political party, but I didn't actually occupy any position in the youth wing or participate so much.
Okay.
Even back then, even when you're young, politics remains politics. And as a lobbyist, we had some issues to push that weren't always necessarily popular with the political parties we were pushing it with, or and again, I was doing this for work, and so therefore that's how it started.
How'd you get involved in a campaign in 2007?
Back then, I was living in Villeray, and I had been living in Villeray for 7 years almost. And the Quebec Liberals had identified a star candidate to oppose incumbent Parti Québécois Elsie Lefebvre, who was, again, a bright, young, very, very sharp young woman who had won the constituency in a by-election in
and with a huge
2004.
likability factor too, right?
Absolutely, huge likability factor. La Reine de Villeray, she had won against another similar star candidate, a Greek woman running in a by-election in what was considered a predominantly Greek constituency. And so Elsie had been elected, and the Liberals were adamant on getting that constituency back. And someone in the Quebec Liberal Party, whom I knew, identified me as someone that could give a hand, and I became number 2 of that campaign, the communications director for Jerry Sklavounos, whom won that year by about 1,000 votes, to our great surprise, because we were extremely disorganized. We really did not know what we were doing. And it was maybe perhaps my second campaign ever, but this was a serious campaign because we could actually win, as opposed to previous campaigns that I'd worked on that, we knew we were just doing it to do it, right?
Yeah.
And so we won, and I hired you.
And the rest is all history.
The rest is history, but nothing happens for nothing, and so I worked for Jerry for 2 years, maybe. We did the 2007-2008 election.
Yeah, and then beginning of 2009, I think you left and you went on to other challenges. I think you went to the office of the Speaker.
I did go to the office of the Speaker of the Quebec National Assembly as sort of de facto Deputy Chief of Staff, handling interparliamentary and international relations, handling the educational mission of the National Assembly, and handling welcome protocol security. Those were the fields upon which I was assigned to. Well, again, I spoke English, French, I speak Spanish, I spoke Italian, I traveled the world, and the Speaker back then was
It was Yvon Valliere.
Yvon Valliere, exactly, someone from Middle Quebec, we'll call it, who had very little international experience, didn't speak English very, very well, and I was there to give him a hand, support him, and bolster his international presence.
I was thinking the other day, and I was actually talking with my wife, and I went back and I'm like, man, I know this kid from 2007, and I'm not sure if I'm still surprised that we stay in touch, or if it's just the relationship that we had and that we created that made it almost inevitable for us to kind of stay that close, right? Because you're in politics, people move around, people shift, there's all these things that happen, and you lose touch with people, and it's kind of normal.
Allegiances will shift, friendship, personal situations will shift as well. Some people come and go in and out of politics. I think you can go on the right here. Yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely clear. And, but also at the same time, I'm someone that's very loyal. I think that loyalty and friendship and family are extremely, extremely important values. And I hold on to these values very, very strongly. And so I don't need to see someone every day to still feel this very, very strong bond, especially in the context where you and I worked extremely, extremely close in the constituency office of a moderately important member of the National Assembly. We had the challenges that we needed to deal with. We were learning and growing together at the same time. And so I sometimes call it it's like going to battle with someone, especially with the things that we lived through. Like I said, having rioters come into your office and occupying your office, dealing with, the riot police, this and that. They turned our office upside down. So these types of experiences are going to forge very, very strong bonds. You can't escape that. You can't forget it, and you can't ignore it either. And so we saw each other once before this year at a gala, at an event, and I'm super happy to see you, and I'm super happy.
And it's funny because it always feels like we were talking or together the previous day, like yesterday or a couple of days ago. It's always been like that, and I appreciate that, man. Do you wanna plug in what you do a little bit now, or?
I don't need to plug in anything, but for full disclosure, I am involved in public and government relations. I'm the senior vice president in an Ottawa-based public and government relations firm called Impact Public Affairs. We are founded in 1997. We have a medium presence and footprint across the country, head office in Ottawa, small team in Toronto, small team in Montreal, an antenna in Quebec City, and one in Vancouver as well. And we're very much in all sorts of sectors. We've been advisors to pretty much anyone and everyone in Canada that has an issue with either the federal government or some provincial governments, speaking to the media. And so that's what I do out of my career.
So when the time comes around for the budget, for example, or election time, you guys are fully aware.
Right, and so
it's all hands on deck kind of thing, right?
This morning, I'm entertaining some colleagues from Ottawa, and we're going to be meeting with some clients later this afternoon. And this morning I was telling my colleagues, right now we're on October 4th, and it's now that we need to start thinking about making some representations to the Quebec government on some budgetary issues, something that could have been done throughout the summer as well. The earlier the better. But right now, this client is ready now to move on this, and so now's the time to seize the day on that.
Cool.
So we're very, very keen on following what's going on, and especially with the federal election going on. It's top of mind on a daily basis.
Let's talk about the federal election, because that's pretty much why I called you in. I thought, initially when I was thinking about this segment to have different candidates from different parties, but then at some point I thought it'd be interesting to have someone that isn't running in the election, that have an experience either in politics or as a journalist or as an analyst or a commentator, that have political commentaries to kind of bring in their feedback on what's going on in the campaign. Just generally, how do you feel about the campaign? And then we're going to talk primarily about the debate that happened this week, and that's it. So just general, how do you feel about this election? What are your thoughts?
This is one of the first few instances where we have elections on fixed dates, and so I think that takes away a lot of the anticipation and the effervescence and positive energy of, when will the election be called? Who knows? Who doesn't know? Who's going to guess, right? And so I think that there was a lot of anticipation, positive anticipation back in the day, which we don't have anymore. I found myself, looking at the calendar 6 months ago and saying, Jesus, we have an election on October 21st, wow, no surprise there. And so we know it's the unavoidable is coming around. And so I think it takes a little bit out of the spontaneity out of that, and it's a bit unfortunate. At the same time, I think that it's fair for electoral agencies and for voters, I guess, and political parties to be prepared in advance, which us lobbyists and publicists affords us an opportunity to prepare, and know when to talk to parties and push issues and agendas. But that being said, I don't think that there's that much of a great enthusiasm for the campaign. There was the French debate on TVA Face à Face a few days ago, and out of the 2 hours that started at 8 p.m., how many of the 1.2 million Quebecers that watched it actually watched it all, and or didn't simply tune out after the first 20 minutes, maybe perhaps?
Well, look, I'm going to tell you one thing, and we're getting into the debate, but for a rare time, I felt actually that it was a good debate. Because we're used to seeing debates where it's just chaos. The moderators can't keep the control. And even, I think this format that TVA had, I think they applied for the first time last year at the provincial election.
Right.
And it was okay. The format, I like it. It gives the opportunity for each leader to kind of express what they have to say. But last year, I had a problem with Pierre Bruno, who is the moderator, because I felt like his journalistic instinct kept coming in the picture. He kept interrupting and, counter attacking the leader's comments. And I was like, dude, shut your mouth. Let them talk. It's a debate. You're just there to moderate, I felt that this time around, he did an excellent job. All in all, I enjoyed it. Of course, there were a few moments that we're going to talk about where, the gloves came off.
But George, how do you prepare to moderate a debate like this? You don't, and Pierre Bruno, whether someone likes him or doesn't, he has a long breadth of career in the reporting industry, and so those are the skills that really come across.
No doubt, but
I did think that the debate was good. I think that 2 hours, uninterrupted 2 hours, is extremely long. I think that intellectually, we're asking a lot of spectators to follow this.
Do you,
with a lot of attention, and to pay the right type of attention to what's going on. Really, sincerely, it was lightning rounds. Plus, there are the linguistic challenges of 2.5 out of 4 candidates that were being represented on this as well. Nominally, Andrew Scheer and Jagmeet Singh, and Justin Trudeau, although he is a francophone, operates and has operated most of his life in English as well. And so I think that his French sometimes is a little rusty, and it's unfortunate, but it's the truth. While Yves-François Blanchet, impeccable French, he's going to do far less well in the English debate coming up on Monday.
I've never heard him speak English.
Neither have I. Being a former Parti Québécois cabinet minister in a Parti Québécois government that historically has refused to speak English with non-francophone stakeholders, it's normal that you've never heard him speak English.
Yeah. But just on a side note, Yves-François Blanchet, because we got to see him in opposition when we were there. I got to see him in government when we were in opposition. He is a fantastic parliamentarian. He's extremely eloquent in expressing his points, and I honestly could not imagine anyone better for the Bloc to have chosen as a leader, and it's showing, right, in the support. I mean, he's really brought everyone together, and the Bloc is really bringing up the support. I'm not sure exactly strategically what the NDP is doing, because they're looking at that and they're thinking, whichever riding resisted the Liberal wave in 2015, are we going to be able to maintain them, or are we going to end up losing them to the Bloc Québécois? Or the other possibilities on a strategic level is the Bloc's presence going to be significant enough to split the vote and have the Liberals just walk right through, which is actually happening in many regions.
Quite certainly, Yves-François Blanchet, didn't save the Bloc Québécois. He brought it back from death. Sincerely, he reached into the darkness and plucked it out from
he was a defibrillator.
The hands of death. That party was destroyed, absolutely destroyed. An absolute level of apathy, and whether he does well in this election or not, he will need to be canonized by the Parti Québécois and the separatist instances for having done a miracle, something that no one else in Quebec could have done. So sincerely, he gets those kudos. He gets those brownie points quite definitely.
I'm curious to see, because there's no way that he's going to lose candidates. If anything, he's going to gain. So whatever happens...
I mean, the Bloc has 10 seats right now, and my projection is that they will gain up to another 10.
I think so too. I agree with you. They're going to be between 15 and 20, which is a victory for them.
Absolutely.
So he has nothing to lose going into this campaign, based on what's going on right now with the Bloc. But going into the debate,
the problem is that the NDP. Well, yes, I know you want to speak about the debate, but let's just finish this sort of like roadmap. The NDP will have lost a lot of seats by the end of this election in Quebec. Then there's no doubt about it. While Jagmeet Singh appears to Quebecers as as a congenial person, someone that they would want to have a drink with, mostly out of curiosity, I don't think that Quebecers are going to be compelled to vote with them, and I think that voting for the candidate in constituencies isn't going to be a sufficiently strong appeal for Quebecers. So we have to imagine that the NDP is going to lose a lot of footing in the province. To whose benefit, and that's the real question.
Yeah.
Going into the debate, I thought that Andrew Scheer's Conservatives were poised to make 4 to 6 or 7 net gains in the province.
Yeah.
But following the debate, I'm doubting that, because those constituencies are neck to neck, in many cases Liberal, Conservative, and sometimes NDP. And I think that as a result of this debate, both the NDP and the Conservatives will have lost some footing to the benefit of the Bloc and or to the Liberals. And it sounds almost crazy to say this, because the Bloc and the Liberals are in diametrically opposed political viewpoints, but Quebecers, as you know, are mi-figue, mi-raisin. Sometimes they're one way, or sometimes they're another, and we see it in Quebec City, where there has been an orange wave in conservative Quebec City, one would say, strong orange wave, and now a strong CAQ wave, which is, again, the CAQ is diametrically opposed to the NDP, ideologically speaking. So that's why I think that a lot of Quebecers see politics as that. I think a lot of Quebecers often have seen themselves as either blue liberals or red Tories,
Yeah.
and the line is thin between both, and which allowed them the versatility to be able to vote for, say, for example, for the liberals of the era or for the progressive conservatives of the era as well.
Yeah. I thought, going into this campaign a couple months ago, based on the wave that we saw of the, right-wing parties, both federally and provincially, I thought it was going to have a big impact in the upcoming federal elections, especially in the regions. We saw Quebec shift to the CAQ, which is arguably, a right-wing party. We saw the right-wing parties win in the Maritimes, like there's in Ontario as well. So I thought, Justin Trudeau is going to have a hard time, especially in Quebec and in the regions. And I honestly think that the surprise factor is indeed Yves-François Blanchet for bringing up the Bloc. I'm looking at polls, for example, in ridings like Berthier and Masquinongé, where you have Ruth Ellen Brosseau, who resisted the wave in 2015, kept her riding. From what we hear, she's an extraordinary parliamentarian. Even locally, people love her.
I've also heard that, yeah.
She's in trouble. And you have the Liberals that are leading because the Bloc has brought up their support as well. So they're splitting the vote. Same thing is happening in Chambly, where Yves-François Blanchet is running. Rosemont is in trouble also. So all these ridings, it's going to be, nail-biting on the 21st of October, I think.
But this is part of the unfairness of politics, of electoral politics. You may have a phenomenal member of parliament like Alexandre Boulris, Rosemont La Petite Patrie, for example, very present, very active. He is the deputy leader of the NDP, but at the same time, as a result of his leaders, lukewarm performance during the TVA face-off, he may lose some votes as a result of this. And it has nothing to do with his own performance or his own service and representation of his constituents. This is the unfairness part of it, right? Andrew Scheer, with his whole story about, is he personally for or against abortion, will have hurt some of the women candidates that are under the Conservative banner in Quebec, simply because Andrew Scheer could have evacuated and gotten rid of this question extremely early on the onset of the debate by saying, yes, by virtue of my religion, by virtue of my beliefs, I think that all life should be protected, and I'm against abortion, but as Prime Minister of all Canadians, I will defend women's value to decide what they do with their own bodies, period. End of story. Then we would have moved on to another story.
See,
hesitation kills. And Andrew Scheer decided to hesitate on this question.
See, you're a communications guy. You're part of the Conservative team. Isn't this an issue that you automatically know 100% that it's going to come up during the debate? How can you not prepare your leader adequately to respond? There's no doubt in my mind that they knew that this is going to come up. For sure, this is going to come up. Or either the gay rights, it's going to come up.
I'm quite convinced that this is something that they had prepared for. And I haven't asked. I didn't reach out to find out. I think they probably have a lot of things to worry about.
Yeah.
Like every other team. But at the same time, I think that this is perhaps a dichotomy of, you have Quebec folks and then you have rest of Canada folks on the campaign. And I see this very often with clients.
They're not watching the French debate though, right?
But I understand
that.
But the rest of Canada folks in your campaign or your communications folk, if they don't have that, that sharp acumen for what makes Quebec specific and don't listen to their Quebec folks on the matter, that's maybe where, opportunities are lost. And I see it in the private sector. Sometimes I will advise clients on a certain issue that I put through my only very, very specific Quebec lens. And at the end of the day, the client has all the money and all the answers. And if the client decides that we're gonna go for an option that I didn't suggest, then we have to live with it.
Yeah.
And this is maybe what happened.
And it sucks that it came on within the first 5 minutes, right? It was a couple uppercuts and he was destabilized for the
draw of the luck.
Yeah.
This issue, immigration and social policies, was the first topic, and it was the white elephant in the room. Pierre Bruno, it's Pierre Bruno that gave Andrew Scheer the uppercut. The other leaders just kicked him once he was on the ground on this issue. But I think that he did well for the rest of the debate. He managed to pick himself up and live through the rest of it.
Here's what I find very curious. I mean, going into the debate, that the other leaders, they have an idea on what to attack Andrew Scheer on, which is, for example, the abortion rights, gay rights, or whatever. Right. And then you can almost imagine the leaders knowing exactly what to attack Justin Trudeau on. ethics violations, SNC Lavalin scandals, resignations. Like this was a horrible year. Like they started 2019 on a horrible note, and yet nobody even attacked him. Nobody even, nobody took advantage of the platform they had during the debate to lay in some shots. I think Justin Trudeau performed exceptionally well, to my surprise. I mean, I don't want to judge the guy, but I didn't think that he was going to come out unscathed as a leader and as an incumbent prime minister.
In the briefing note that I wrote to our clients on our Canadian English-speaking clients on the debate that they didn't watch or couldn't have understood, I did say that, in my opinion, I think, Yves-François Blanchet came up on top of this debate simply because of his mastery of the French language. Yeah. He was cool, calm, collected, sharp, methodical, really, sincerely, he had everything to win. And then, second, I think that Andrew Scheer and Justin Trudeau, came in close second.
Oh, you have them tied for second?
Absolutely, because Andrew Scheer could have done much worse. This was a danger moment for Andrew Scheer, and he could have done much worse. And in spite of the fact that the abortion issue came up full frontal from the get-go, and he didn't answer it well, I think that he still managed to hold his ground for the rest of the debate. Justin Trudeau, really a little bit like Teflon, reminded me of Jean Charest in the good old days. Yeah. Like Teflon, really dodged the bullets that could have taken
Honestly,
him down.
I have an issue with you comparing him to Jean Charest. But
there's no comparison. There's no comparison. But I mean, Jean Charest has an answer, always had an answer to everything. Yeah. Phenomenal debater. And last but not least, and someone has to come in last, and unfortunately it's Jagmeet Singh, because in spite of the fact that he did well, his French is very good. He surprised me how well he spoke French. He's eloquent, he knows the issues. And he's, like I said, he's Mr. Congeniality. At the same time, he will not become prime minister. He will lose seats in Quebec. And nothing that he has done or that he could have done would have made him gain seats in Quebec. And so it's unfortunate. He's not either of his two predecessors. And that's the set of cards that he has to deal with.
Yeah.
But like I said, Andrew Scheer could have lost far more, could have really made far greater errors, and I think that he lives to tell the tale. There's another French debate. That's the reality, right? So how funny how this great country, which has a majority of Anglophones, will have two French debates and only one English debate. So we'll see we'll see how this turns out on October 10th.
I thought Andrew Scheer, I think people had much bigger expectations of Andrew Scheer going into this debate, because he's the best position to attack Justin Trudeau. He's the official opposition. He's been doing it for months, if not years.
I know,
in the House.
But George, it's like in a race. The greatest danger is when you're within sight of the finish line.
Yeah.
Both for the leader and for the runner-up. So greatest danger for Justin Trudeau could be reelected. Anything could derail that reelection. And same thing applies to the runner-up, presumably Andrew Scheer in this case, where, I think that his objective was to cause as least damage, was to expose himself to the minimum, and having taken that strong hit on the abortion issue, which did destabilize him, but didn't paralyze him at the same time, allowed him to stick to the rest of his plan and as we say in French, sauver des meubles, do and commit and say as least as possible, so that, if you don't say anything, then you can be attacked for it or held accountable for it.
So, okay, let's talk about expectations going into the debate, like each leader. What are you expecting? We'll start with Andrew Scheer.
In the upcoming English language debate, I'm expecting that Andrew Scheer will then take off the real gloves. I think that perhaps, again, part of their strategy, the Conservative strategy, was to go mild on Justin Trudeau, not pull out the heavy artillery immediately. Why? Because 1.2 million viewers saw it out of 37 million Canadians. And so I think that's where he's going to, take the gloves off and, probably going to hit the Liberals the hardest. At the same time, I think that there's a strong communication or a communion of conscience sometimes, as odd as this may sound, between Conservative electors and Bloc Québécois electors, especially in like I said, middle Quebec that is mostly rural, smaller towns, that has traditionally progressive conservative voters who are conservative in some way, but are progressive at the same time, who have a very, very strong attachment to Quebec and a lukewarm attachment to Canada. That's why I think there's a communion of conscience between those two electors. So I think that Andrew Scheer needs to take as many shots as possible at Yves-François Blanchet, pull out that, he's a separatist, wants to break up the country, is going to elect members of parliament whom at the end of the day will not achieve anything constructive other than making recommendations. And almost helping is the same as not helping at all. I've said this once before when you and I used to work together. Maria Mourani came out on Twitter after the former Bloc MP Ahantsika or wherever that neighborhood is, and she came out and she said, Bloc members of parliament will never have a bill adopted in the House of Commons, and she talks about the bill that she had adopted as an independent member of parliament on human trafficking, if I'm not mistaken. And so when you have former Bloc Québécois MPs coming out of the woodworks to take a shot at you and saying, the Bloc will never do any good for this country.
In fact, I did something as an independent.
I had to leave to be able to do something as an independent. I think that's where the Conservatives need to be able to establish that stance with that sort of range of Quebecers that could go either Bloc or could go either Conservative.
That's a pretty interesting strategy. I hadn't thought about that. I was convinced that Andrew Scheer going into the debate, his only focus would be to attack Justin and to discredit him.
Yeah, and in what world will traditional Liberal electors decide to turn their back on Justin Trudeau to vote for Andrew Scheer? It would never happen. I think that the best that Andrew Scheer could do was convince traditional Liberal electors to not go out to vote.
Yeah, okay.
But he's not going to convert those votes, to use a football expression, while I think that it's completely possible to turn Bloc Québécois electors to Conservative electors,
right,
or wishy-washy, middle of the road voters who haven't made up their mind, but that, like I said, are in that sort of progressive conservative Quebec nationalist zone.
Okay, Justin Trudeau. So obviously, I think we know, traditionally the incumbent premier or prime minister. You're going into this campaign. You wanna demonstrate people that you're still at the caliber of being a prime minister.
Right.
You don't want to come out too aggressive.
No.
Right. You want to show poise.
You have to defend what you've achieved.
Yeah.
You have to
basically repeat what he did in this campaign.
And so that puts you on a defensive stance immediately from the get-go, because you're out there defending what you've achieved for Canadians on your agenda over the last 4 years. At the same time, we also have to be cognizant that he is, the most likely to form a government come October 21st, today, that may be a majority or likely a minority at this point. It's still too early to tell, I think. And so therefore, he has to demonstrate that, he's delivered on the promises that he made 4 years ago, that, the promises that he hasn't delivered on, that he has reasons for it. Either they're on the way to be delivered, or it's more complicated, and it happens. Governing is extremely complicated. And he also has to demonstrate that current preoccupations of Canadians are going to be top of mind for the next 4 years. And of course now, it's popular and populist to speak about the environment.
Yes.
The environment is really the thing to talk about, and it's the big issue. But at the same time, there are fiscality issues, the elderly, protecting rights, projecting our influence across the world. Canadians are going to ask themselves, is Justin Trudeau the best person to be able to deliver what really matters to me in my head, in my heart, and most especially in my pocket? But also, is Justin Trudeau the right person to represent us abroad?
Yeah.
Those are really the real questions. Because the two other leaders, have no chance of becoming prime minister or forming the government. In a minority context, Jagmeet Singh could play an important role in a minority Liberal government.
Yes.
The balance of power, lending his support. Not necessarily in a coalition, but being there to prop up the vote when is required. The same as the Bloc could do the same thing with the Conservatives. I think that the Conservatives have, taken a strong stance on Quebec. Conservatives fundamentally, while they are federalists, I do think that they are the most attached to the concept of Quebec being a nation and autonomy of the provinces and less government. And so yes. I think that resonates a lot in the minds of Quebec electors. And so maybe the Conservatives could be bolstered up in a minority government by the Bloc, but I think it would necessarily be on a case-by-case basis, because there's no foreseeable future where Yves-François Blanchet could come back to Quebec and say, yes, I'm going to support the Conservatives because I need to, or because Andrew Scheer is going to tell me what to do. That's not a universe where that would happen.
In the possibility where he wins like almost a third of the seats in Quebec, he can play an important role in Ottawa. All right.
Of course he can, and that's what he's defended in the face-off on TVA. He defended that, the role of parliamentarians is important as individuals, that in spite of our system being more complicated for independents and smaller parliamentary groups to be able to affect change that is legislative and quite certainly regulatory and other, I think that parliamentarians don't want to feel that they're useless, that they're just people that are gonna stand up to vote when they're told to, or ask the questions that they're told to by the caucus. I think the parliamentarians want to more and more play an important role. I think the Senate has certainly taken that way and that pathway in the past few years. I think senators are far more independent and have a lot more latitude to be a true sober second thought in this country today than they have since the inception of the Senate. But like I said, it's all going to depend. Are Canadians going to send a majority government to Ottawa? It's 170 seats, the majority, or they're going to send a minority. It depends. If it's a small minority, then everyone's going to have to make an effort to make this country governable, so that we're not there's an expression in French, un parlement à l'italienne, which through proportional and representation, etc., it's very, very hard and complicated to form a government, like in many countries in Europe, the Netherlands, Belgium, France, also to some degree.
Yeah.
And so those are all the questions that Canadians need to ask themselves. And Yves-François Blanchet almost pleaded for a minority government where he would have a bigger role to play without ever being a cabinet minister or being officially associated to a political party to prop them up. But at the same time, we know that minority governments in this country have an average life expectancy of 18 months. Of 18 months. And so do we want to go back to the polls in 18 months? Do we want to live through 18 months of uncertainty where, we're going to have some gridlock on some complicated issues that either the Liberals or the Conservatives have promised and committed to deliver by virtue of the platform that their members have drafted and voted, that Canadians have sent them to Ottawa to work on. And so those are the true questions that Canadians need to ask themselves.
So going into the next debate, expectations, NDP, and because now there's also going to be the Green Party participating in these elections, and we know that they're they're up against each other.
They are.
NDP and the
but I
Green
think
Party.
that they're up against each other really mostly on the environmental issue. I don't think that on the social progressive issues, I think they're on the same page as well.
Yeah.
But as for everything else, I think that the Greens sometimes they have maybe slightly center right fiscal policies or mindset. To my great surprise, I actually like Elizabeth May very, very much. I've had the chance to see her speak to small groups of clients on Hill Days in Ottawa, and sincerely, she is well liked.
Yeah.
To my great surprise, again,
but you saw the first debate there that happened where Justin Trudeau wasn't present. I found her amazing. She was very good.
And she is very good. She's an experienced parliamentarian. She's a member of the Order of Canada, which is not something that we hand out to just anyone. She's respected, appreciated. She has, again, a long breadth of service to the Canadian people and to the public. And so I really do hope so that the Greens are going to get a couple of more members of Parliament elected. I think that they would be the right thing for this country in the 21st century.
And especially with the trend, right?
The real question is where or how, is Pierre Nantel in Longueuil-Saint-Hubert, who is a recent transplant from the NDP to the Greens, is he going to keep his seat?
I'm not sure if they'll be able to do anything in Quebec. If anything, it's going to be more in BC, where they have a groundswell of support there.
Right, and I think
she elected a second member, right?
She did,
earlier this year.
Absolutely, in a by-election. And the reality is that Quebecers, I think a lot of Quebecers will be interested to vote for the Green Party because of their attachment to environmental issues, sustainable development, thinking about the future of our planet, which I think that is ridiculous because the planet, whether we're here or not, the planet's going to do well without us. I think, think about the future of humanity on this planet. That's the more appropriate expression. And I think that there's a lot of sensibilities in Quebec for that. But unfortunately, by virtue of how our electoral system is crafted, they're going to gain some percentages across the board, but not enough to be able to elect anyone in Quebec. Maybe, like I said, Pierre Nantel maybe could get reelected. I think that he could get reelected only on his own track record and on his own name.
Yeah.
And hopefully he'll get reelected as a...
But that's pretty big, though. Gaining a seat in Quebec, it's huge. I remember when the NDP finally got a seat in Quebec, it was the biggest news, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But that neighborhood, Saint-Hubert, Longueuil, is traditionally very bloc, very separatist. It's always has been the case. He's running against a liberal candidate who was formerly a separatist minister in Quebec. Health minister in the Pays-Norois, PQ government, Régent Hébert.
Just a mess.
Who's not from the area. He's really catapulted in that area. And so it's okay to go and run anywhere.
Yeah.
You grew up in Park Extension, and so when you ran in that neighborhood, it was completely normal. But had I run in Park Extension, I'm not for Park Extension, but I have sensibilities and a long standing friendship with the Greek community. And so sometimes there are matches that happen out of thin air. That being said, the Bloc could get elected. They have a strong candidate who's a comedian, a well-known Quebec comedian. His name escapes me. But at the same time, the CAQ got someone elected there against Martine Ouellette in the last provincial election. And so therefore, again, part of that CAQ wave, perhaps. Maybe they'll craft some sort of a space for Pierre Nantel to say, hey, people in my constituency, vote for me, only I can defend your issues. And it wouldn't be completely outlandish for that to happen, but I haven't seen the most recent numbers for that neighborhood.
It's close. It's going to be a three-way race.
And so that's why I think that if in a context where the Bloc Québécois was off the radar, I think it would have been a clear race between Liberal and Conservatives in a lot of constituencies where the NDP was formerly the incumbent or currently the incumbent. Now, the reality is that because of Blanchet's outstanding performance on Wednesday night, it's very, very possible that, there's going to be some upsets or there are going to be some very, 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 very tight races. There's an expression for that. Where maybe even judges will need to weigh in on because it could come down to maybe 100 votes. Which is where things get interesting, right? Which is where things get interesting and where we have to remind people that voting does matter.
Of course.
When it comes down to losing or winning by 25, 30, 100 votes, that's when you realize that everyone needs to go out to vote.
We'll wrap it up. Some hot topics that came out of that debate where really the gloves came off. Bill 21, where since the beginning of the campaign, I think actually at the beginning of the campaign, everybody kind of wanted to stay away from that issue. And then
do we really have to talk about it?
Well, no, because exactly. Let's stay away from the issue. No, because it brought up a lot of emotions during the campaign, and especially in the last week or so, where Justin Trudeau has seemed to kind of leave that door open, where he's saying that we will intervene and defend the people. I'm not sure if that's a smart strategy, given that Quebec elected a majority government that campaigned on that issue. But it's a
couple of things there. Yes, it's a hot topic issue. Yes, Quebecers have elected a majority government in Quebec City that tackled this issue, but this issue, Bill 21, wasn't adopted unanimously.
No, of course.
And so therefore we have to presume that not a unanimity of Quebecers are in favor of this bill, and the proof is in the pudding. There's some court challenges to it. There's been some marches, demonstrations against it, etc. And so while there is some consensus, it's not unanimity. We can't confuse both. I think that the Liberals immediately came out very, very strongly against it. And I think that part of being a Liberal in Canada is defending individual rights. And so therefore, I think it was completely normal that Justin Trudeau and his Liberals would come out against it, especially in the context where, we have a Canadian Constitution and a Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms that guarantee a number of things, including, according to some perspectives, that Bill 21 is infringing upon those rights. At the same time, I did feel that Justin Trudeau in the debate didn't go so hard on Bill 21. He was much more nuanced. It wasn't an absolute that they were going to challenge. They were going to think about it. They were going to follow the situation closely. They're offering some support to some court challenges through a Justice Canada program that affords small groups to be able to receive some funding to be able to challenge some court decisions.
Do you think that he's leaving something for later on in the campaign? Because if he comes out adamantly against it and says, I will challenge it, it's going to have a huge impact in, for example, Montreal, Laval, the regions around Montreal, and the greater Toronto area, where he can really go and score some points.
And once the toothpaste is out of the tube, it's impossible to put it back in.
Yes.
And so I think that it was wise for him to not be so committal on the topic of Bill 21 during the debate, but we'll see what he says on the English debate on Monday night. English Canadians are outraged by, how could Quebecers do this? How could Quebecers enact such a law that, is a patent discrimination of certain Quebecers as opposed to others? Again, and I'm not making a judgment of values on it, and I'm not pronouncing myself on the merits or the grievances to Bill 21. But what I do want to say is that, objectively, English Canadians have a stance on this and French Canadians have a different stance on this. And that's the dichotomy of our country you have to deal with, and you want to govern for everyone. So I think Justin Trudeau acted wisely by not overtly committing himself to this. But he may have to do it on the English debate. And, the situations evolve on a daily basis. There are, 14, 16 days left of this campaign. Anything can happen. It's an eternity. The NDP will force the Liberals to come out strongly on a position on this. The Conservatives, want to respect provincial jurisdictions and want to let Quebecers decide for themselves what they should do on a number of issues. So will they move forward on any pertaining to this, anything else pertaining to this? And then that leaves us with our favorite characters in display that we haven't heard on this week, but that we will hear on Monday at the English debate. So Elizabeth May, Green Party, and Mad Max, our friend Max Bernier, who could win a seat, but probably will not get any other seats elected across the country. So, I think that, we have a couple of wild cards in the deck coming up in the English debate. And I think that Canadians have an obligation to themselves to watch this debate. It is of a crucial importance. We get to do this. This democratic exercise once every 4 years at a Canadian federal level, more or less. These decisions are going to have a true and decisive impact on what Canada is going to look like in 4 years, in 8 years, in 16 years from now. Canadians need to pay attention to what's going on in their politics. Otherwise, politics is going to take care of what Canadians.
Highlight reel.
Go for it.
The funniest moment for me when Andrew Scheer blasted Justin Trudeau about using 2 airplanes, which again didn't seem to bring much more attention to the debate, but I just found it hilarious. How he goes, I have 2 planes, one for you and one for your costumes and for your canoes. It was just hilarious.
Andrew Scheer, I think, I could see the glee in his face. I think that he was laughing on the inside, and quite rightly so. I think that it was a good, really, really good clip. He gets my 2 thumbs up on that. At the same time, that the Liberals use a plane or 2. Who cares, really?
Well, it is being discussed now, right? So there's a couple articles that came out today calling Justin Trudeau a hypocrite for, standing side by side with Greta Thunberg, who doesn't travel by plane.
But it's the equivalent of telling me, Carlos, you travel with a small suitcase or carry-on. Good for you. Oh no, you travel with a big luggage.
Yeah.
Luggage, you got to travel. You're traveling, and and Canada's the second largest country in the world.
Yeah.
So it's completely normal that there's going to be some traveling that needs to be done. Number one. Number two, you carry some stuff with you. You have reporters, you have staff, you have equipment for your shows, for your rallies, for whatever public events that you're doing. So to me, it's absolutely not the end of the world. You're either traveling by plane or you are not, and so whether you're using 1 plane or 2, to me, is quite irrelevant. Now, there is 1 plane in the world that is the least polluting and most advanced commercial airplane in the world. It used to be called the C Series. Now it's called the A220, and it has a very, very low greenhouse gas emissions. And so I think that, if everyone had used that plane, we'd be better off. But, the story doesn't say.
No.
And Airbus is not my client, and so.
Yeah, we have to specify what it is. It's not another plug. Any other parts or moments of the debate that kind of?
I think everyone made a big deal of the dégueulasse word used by Jack Singh, and I'm a francophone. French is my first language, and sometimes I speak out of turn. I use a term in English that I shouldn't have used. I certainly do it in Spanish and in other languages that I try to speak.
I also think it's also because of his lack of maybe...
Yeah, no, so exactly. So it was an accidental use of a word that was maybe a little strong. I don't think that it was incredibly outrageous or outlandish. So I think that we give him a little bit of flack too much on that. But quite certainly, out of your real story, the abortion issue really was... was not sincerely, it was like, being hit by a shovel in the forehead in the first 30 seconds of the debate. And again, the draw the luck, the topic came out, but you got to roll with the punches. You're going to be the leader of a political party that aspires to lead our government on our behalf on domestic issues and on international issues. You need to be able to be prepared to deal with tough questions and complicated issues. And good on Andrew Scheer for recovering from this very, very strong hit that was very, very fair. It was above the belt, in my opinion. Kudos to him for recovering, and kudos to him for not letting him affect too much the rest of the debate.
24 hours after that, he came out and he finally said it after so much pressure from the media. You're a communications guy. Would you have advised him to do that or not? To keeping it kind of...
Hindsight is 2020. I would have advised him to strongly come out with the truth. When something even has added value of being the truth, you have, if say it, get it out of the way.
But he did it during the debate. The fact that he did it the day after.
Yes, it evacuated the question, but it also raised the other question now we know about his dual citizenship. And he had attacked Stéphane Dion and former Governor General's capacity of being able to be a cabinet minister or a leader of the Liberal Party or a prime minister or head of state as having dual nationality. I think that there's, you say one thing but you do something else, and so I think that's where there's a disconnect between, there's a disconnect at the Andrew Scheer level that I think that Canadians are going to hold against him. Are they going to hold it against him forever? I don't know. Is it going to affect him, the rest of the country? I'm not sure either. But, I did hear Foisy from Radio Canada ask Andrew Scheer, because Andrew Scheer answered, no one asked if I had dual nationality. And so Foisy asked him, is there anything else that we should be asking you? And so, you want to avoid those situations. And unfortunately, Andrew Scheer has to deal with those right now.
Lastly, and we're closing, do you think this debate had any impact on the vote, or you think people are still going to hold off to see what, how the campaign will evolve until the end?
It was a very long and a little dry 2-hour debate in French only, broadcast only in Quebec and to some parts of Eastern Ontario and Western New Brunswick at 8 p.m. that lasted till 10 p.m. I'm amazed that that 1.2 million listeners tuned in to watch it. I don't think that it will have a phenomenal or a great palpable impact on the end result. I do think that the next upcoming debates will. And so this may have been maybe a bit of a
practice round.
A practice round to some degree. Especially a practice round, in the worst set of circumstances in French for two leaders who are non-Francophones. And so this is where I think that, this is where we have to see it as only that, a debate only in Quebec on mostly Quebec issues or of national issues that have a Quebec impact. But quite certainly, there's going to be some clips that will come out of this. Could be the object of future attack ads from one part or another. I think that, I saw Yves-François Blanchet yesterday touring his own constituency. He looked like, like $1 million, braggadocious of having been the quote-unquote winner from that debate.
Yeah.
Again, a campaign is very long, and we knew the election was going to be October 21st. So we know that everyone's been campaigning for the past 6 months, but the real campaign is right now. And I think that, Canadians need to pay attention. And we Canadians, more importantly, need to go vote absolutely as well.
Because the truth is, anything can change, right? And I just want to remind everyone listening or watching that the 2015 election, Justin Trudeau won in the last week, or maybe let's say a week and a half. Mm-hmm. He was coming not even second, he was coming in third. That's where people were projecting him. And it's the last week. And I remember even the topic, it was on the headscarf. The whole debate on the headscarf, that's what did it for him. And it changed everything. And, to many people's surprise, he won with the majority on top. So but anything can change.
Anything can change. Any issue can become a problem issue or a wedge issue, depending on who raises it, who carries it, and how leaders will react to it. And so who raises it, we can't control that. Who carries it? When reporters decide to stick on an issue, the fourth power in the country, then there's no telling them. And once they take a bite out of you, they're not going to let go until you've answered. They've received some satisfactory answer, and reporters dogged Andrew Scheer on the abortion issue on that. And then you have to react to it. And so you either react positively and take the bull by the horn and own it, and face it, and then put it beside you or past you, or you let it linger, and you don't know how to react. I think that in any crises, whether it be in a situation like this or in the private sector, in a crisis management, you need to be able to face the music and react positively, and react in a way that's going to afford you the opportunity to address the issue and then put it behind you, then switch the narrative. And that's where really professionals need to come in to be able to do that.
Dude, thanks for coming on. And
thank you. Sincerely, this was a lot more fun than I thought.
So you got to come on a longer format.
Yeah, absolutely.
Much more relaxed. Don't dress up too classy and stuff. You don't need to impress me.
If you think that I would dress up like this to impress you, we're gonna take a left here. I know old Montreal like the back of my head, and I love this neighborhood.
Dude, thanks a lot, man. It was a pleasure seeing you again, and we should do this more often.
We definitely do. Thank you.